Hello everyone and welcome back to another YouTube video. Today I thought I would dive into the world of puzzles. Now I absolutely love the Puzzle Rush feature on chess.com where you can either give yourself 3 minutes, 5 minutes, or an unlimited time to solve as many puzzles as you can, and you have 3 strikes, and when you get the third one wrong, then you have to reset. Now, I have been doing Puzzle Rush more diligently for about 2 years now, and I mainly do the 3-minute Puzzle Rush, and my highest score is being able to get 45 puzzles done in 3 minutes. I reached that peak this month, so that was a really special moment for me. And what I've thought of doing is going through the first 20 puzzles of Puzzle Rush and kind of explaining my tips for pattern recognition to get through those puzzles faster. Now, some of this is luck. Sometimes I speed through them and I will get some puzzles wrong, but as I've been doing this more and more the past couple of years, I've picked up some patterns to help me speed through them a bit faster and thought of just passing on some tips of pattern recognition. If you are trying to break a new record in your own Puzzle Rush, or if you're just trying to figure out some tips to solve puzzles faster, hopefully one or two of these tips can help you. So what I thought of doing first is solving them live for you guys, going through the first 20, and then I'll break down each puzzle into what helped me figure out the answer to that puzzle as fast as I was able to solve it. Alrighty, so now I've gone through all the 20 puzzles. I ended my run, so let's jump on through. Starting from the first puzzle, I'll just talk you guys through some pattern recognition tips. So with this first one, I automatically noticed that there was a hanging piece. Especially with these first puzzles, most of them are checkmated ones. This happens to not be one, but the 3 things you always want to pay attention to when you're trying to solve puzzles really fast, and it is the easier puzzles, is always look for checks and captures. And that's a good tip to carry with you even when you're not solving puzzles. Whenever you're looking at your candidate moves, look for forcing moves first, so your opponent has to react to them, and those happen to be checks and captures. So here, I think I initially touched the knights just because my instinct, I saw a knight hanging and I just wanted to take it. But obviously taking with the queen makes most sense because it is a check, it is a capture at the same time, and I am forking the king and the rook at the same time, so that was the answer for that one. For this puzzle, and it was kind of funny because I think this puzzle and the next puzzle were both pawn pushes, and for some reason I always struggle with these, mainly because I'm trying to figure out whose turn is it and which way the pawns are going. But once you realize that with these puzzles, they're really simple because you're usually simply just pushing a pawn all the way to its promotion square, and this is exactly what this one was. This is the pawn that I'm pushing, it's going up this way, the king can't catch up, so just push it as fast as you can, and you're going to promote first. And likewise, this was similar. I think I tried to move the black pawn. Again, it's just something I struggle with. I don't know if you struggle with it. But again, my pawn is 2 squares away. This pawn is 3 squares away. So just simply push it all the way. And the faster you get at pushing those pawns forward, the more time you're going to save, basically. For this puzzle, again, always look for checks first, followed by captures. I looked for the first check I had, which this happened to be the only check in the position. And it happens to be checkmate at the same time. So this one again made it a little bit easier because I'm in check, so I noticed this rook was hanging really quickly. But again, always look for pieces that are just hanging, and it makes it purely simple to spot this, and it comes with checkmate as well, so it's a little bit of a bonus. This one over here, I noticed that this pawn was blocking off the king, so I simply looked for checks, and again, this is the only check in the position, which happens to be checkmate at the same time. A lot of these first 10 puzzles, you'll notice is just how fast can you spot the correct check or the only check in the position. So again, looking for checks and captures is super helpful when you're solving puzzles. Again, this is just testing how fast can you spot the check. So I noticed both of them are lined up on f2. And usually you can also kind of tell because the king is very boxed in. So most of the time they're helping you find the checkmate with that hint as well. Again, this one was one of those push the pawn as fast as you can. The king is not in time to stop the pawn, so just run the pawn all the way up because your king is already stopping their pawn, so you don't have to go chasing it. So again here, I spotted the fastest check that I could, and this was a safe check, and it happened to also be checkmate. So only safe check in the position, checkmate in one. So over here, again, I kind of did the same thing, spotting my checks. I looked for safe checks first, and between knight c3, that drops the knight, and queen e1, that is a safe check, I went with queen e1. And again, I was looking, again, as soon as I give another check, I look for another check again, and this is protected by the knight, and it happens to be checkmate as well. So you can kind of see, at least for how many have we done? Yeah, this was the 10th puzzle right here. So as you can see within the first 10, majority of them is just spotting the checks as fast as you can. So over here, I looked for checks first before captures. So in order of forcing moves, you always want to look for the checks first, right? Because if I look for a capture, I'm going to see that there's a bishop hanging here, right? But I'm always going to look for checks first because they're more forcing than a capture. My opponent does not have to respond to this capture, plus they're already up so much material, so I definitely want to see if there's something better out there. And the only safe check in this position is queen c1, and here we have a pretty classic background checkmate that you'll see a lot, so just check and trying to capture the pieces as fast as you can to checkmate. This is a very classic type of checkmate, specifically on chess.com puzzle rush that I've noticed. And essentially what it is you see both pieces lined up. You see that the king doesn't really have any escape squares. The pawns are blocking off all of their exits. So it's a very classic check mates. So you give a check, push the king in to clear up this file here, and because you have two pieces and they only have one piece on this square, you have a very nice classic back rank mates. You will probably see a bunch of these if you do puzzle rush runs, and you can save a ton of time by being able to spot this pattern very quickly. Over here again, this was a very classic spot the mate as fast as you can. I saw that this bishop was eyeing this pawn on f7. This is a very classic checkmate up here, so mate in one. Again, this is exactly what I mentioned a couple puzzles ago, a very similar position. I was able to save a lot of time again on these because I'm able to spot these checkmates in 1s and 2s really quickly. I see that my pieces are lined up. There's a very classic back rank checkmate. I have to make room for the king to leave so this square gets vacant, and then I simply go check, and it's mates. So over here, we're drifting a little bit away from the checkmate in 1s and 2s, and the answer to this problem was queen b3 with a very nice fork over the king and the bishop. A huge giveaway for me in this puzzle was the fact that the pawn was on f6. You might have heard from the one and only Ben Feingold, never play the move f6. While I don't necessarily believe that in every single position in chess, this is a huge giveaway because before you castle, if you have your pawn out on f6, these diagonals become very weak. So in my head, the minute that they castled, I instantly knew that I was looking at a very nice diagonal here. And again, I looked for checks first, right? Look for those forcing moves first. This was one of the checks that I saw first. I saw bishop c4, but I saw that was just a simple check. I scanned my other options, queen b3 being another one, and I saw, oh, this is a very classic fork. Can't stop. You can't defend the bishop and the king at the same time. So classic fork, and you win a piece. So with this problem, I saw that there were a couple checks that I needed to look at. I could either trade rooks, or I saw that there was bishop f3. Now this was a bit jumbled in my mind as I was doing it. I remembered that part of it. But I knew if I traded rooks, I didn't have another check to follow up with. And I also knew that I was down in material, so that didn't make too much sense. So I figured it was going to be a team effort full of checks. So I saw this was a safe check. So that was my instinct that I went with. And a lot of this you'll see, because it is timed, the first 10 to 20 you do just have to use your instinct sometimes, even outside of the normal process that I've been taking you through to calculate as much as you can. So bishop f3 had a nice check. And then here I saw that I have the option to do rook e2 or play my rook 8 to e2. So there's rook 1 to e2 check or rook 8 to e2 check, and those seem like the only options for checks in the position. I knew I already had a rook over on e1, and if I brought this rook up, I could give a check, but I can't even take the bishop. I didn't see where this was going. So as I mentioned before, when I saw bishop f3 was the first check, I had a feeling it was a team effort. So because I haven't used this rook yet, I decided to bring it down and join in on the fun, and also saw that I'm simply removing the defender from this rook right here. So I forced the king to move from the first and second rows, and I simply win the rook. So this problem is another one of those spot the check as fast as you can. I knew that it had to be a check here, and the only safe check that I saw was queen e3, so that was kind of an instant move, and I could quickly tell that the king couldn't come closer because they were going to get mated. So after the king's forced over there, I just had to find another safe check, and there's queen e4 and queen d3. Both win a rook, but the difference is I'm going for checkmate with a very nice back rank mate here. I knew that the king cannot come up to the second row, so this was definitely a more deadly check because I have a very nice back rank mate, cutting off the king on both files. This one can be a bit of a tricky one if you used my tips for the beginning pawn positions. Usually it is a pawn race, but if you are quick to do that, you're going to get it wrong because this pawn is 2 squares away from promotion and your pawn still has quite a bit of a way to go. So I knew very well that I couldn't just run this pawn up the board. I need to make sure I prioritize stopping their pawn. So always be wary of your surroundings, right? The minute you see a pawn position, don't just think, oh, it's a pawn race, right? Because again, all these tips that I'm giving you are simply just tips. They're not the correct answer. I don't want you to associate a pawn endgame with push the pawn closest to promotion and hope for the best, because that's not going to get you very far. And again, as these problems get harder, there's going to be more of a catch to them. So I was aware that my opponent's pawn was way closer to promoting than I was, so I needed to make sure I prioritized being able to stop their pawn from pushing. So I knew that I couldn't really push my pawn, because if they pushed, my king does not make it back in time, so I knew I had to come around my pawn in order to stop this. So that's why I moved my king back, king d6, and then I decided to push my pawn forward because that allows my king to come in just in time to stop and capture this pawn. So always be careful with these passed pawns because they can trip you up, and they have tripped me up plenty of times. This happened to be a very simple mate in one. I saw the battery between the bishop and the queen on this diagonal, instantly saw this knight was defending the g7 square, so I saw how far could I go down this diagonal, spotted h8, very nice checkmated one here. So instantly when I got this problem, I saw that my rook was cutting off the king, and therefore the king couldn't go back. So all I was really looking for is, again, what I'm looking for in every single problem. Forcing moves first. Where is a safe check? The only safe check in this position is moving this pawn to h5. Moving this pawn to f5 loses the pawn. My rook does not have any safe checks, so I knew that if this rook cuts off this king, and this is a safe check, the king is basically boxed in. And this is a very nice checkmate in one. I think I took about like 5 or 10 seconds on this problem when I shouldn't have. Again, I don't know what it is when there's not very many pieces left on the board and they're all similar. With pawns or with rooks, I'm constantly figuring out what color I'm playing and where I'm moving to. This is a very simple mate in two, but for some reason for a few seconds I thought it was white to move. But once you get over that, you'll notice this is a very classic rook checkmate because the kings are facing each other, and this can be helpful if you're not as familiar with how the rook checkmate works. This king actually boxes in the other king by covering all the squares. That's why opposition is so important in the endgame, and that's a term that you'll hear a lot when you're studying endgames. Because these kings are looking at each other and covers all these squares, all you have to do is slide the rook down, and you have a very nice easy checkmate in two. So that concludes how I used pattern recognition to solve these 20 puzzles in my own Puzzle Rush run. They do vary. Sometimes the puzzles are easier, sometimes the puzzles are harder. I'll definitely say I did get a lot of checkmate in ones and checkmate in twos that were quite easy for me to spot. Now again, the puzzles vary just depending on your luck. But hopefully this gives you a little bit of an insight on how I spot the answer to these problems, or kind of what they're about really quickly. And hopefully some of these tips can help you on your Puzzle Rush run when you're trying to time yourself and see how many you can get in 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Now, is this helpful for training your actual chess, or should you do the unlimited timed puzzle rush? Personally, I think both are helpful. I think the untimed puzzle rush is great to just sit down, make sure you're understanding the patterns, make sure you're forcing yourself to calculate, and make sure you see all the lines out before you commit to a line. Because again, like I mentioned, with puzzle rush, a lot of it is your intuition. However, I think the timed puzzle rush is really good to see how your pattern recognition is going, because for a lot of these puzzles, I'm not sitting and calculating every line before I commit to it. As I mentioned, for all these 20 puzzles, a lot of it is just my intuition, and I'm using these pattern recognition that I've learned over the years of doing so many of these puzzle rushes to help me get through them. I would have never gotten to 45 in 3 minutes had I not been able to go through these first 20 as fast as I'm able to. Now, granted, I still do get some of these wrong when I am trying to go through the first 10 or 20 very fast. But again, this isn't a guarantee that if you know all the patterns off the top of your head that you're going to get them all right, because naturally mistakes do happen. But I do think the more you're able to pick up on pattern recognition and learn different patterns to help you get through the basic puzzles, you'll have a higher chance of smashing whatever record you're trying to reach. So I hope this video was helpful. Hopefully you're able to learn a tip or two from this. So make sure you guys give this video a like, comment down below if this was helpful or what other videos you guys would like to see. Also make sure to smash that subscribe button. Thank you so much for your time, and I will see you guys on the next video.